There is a city in northern India where nothing is broken. The walls still stand. The palaces still stand. The great courts, the carved pillars, the marble screens, all of it exactly where the builders left it. No war flattened this place. No fire took it. No earthquake brought it down. It was simply left. 400 years ago, the most powerful man on earth built this city stone by stone. He made it his capital. He filled it with poets and painters, priests and philosophers. And then, after just 14 years, he walked out of the gates and never lived here again. The buildings are perfect. The silence is the mystery. Why would a man who had everything abandon the one thing he built to last forever? This is the story of Fatehpur Sikri, and the answer is not the one you've been told. You arrive the way an emperor's guests once did, looking up. The gateway is called the Buland Darwaza, the lofty gate, and it is still the tallest gateway in the world. 54 meters of red and buff sandstone climbing out of a sweep of 42 stone steps, built to make every visitor feel exactly how small they were. Akbar raised it to mark a conquest, his victory in Gujarat. Years later, he had a second triumph carved into its eastern arch. But the words he chose for the main face were not about war at all. They are attributed to Jesus. The world is a bridge, the inscription reads. Pass over it, but build no house upon it. It is a strange thing to carve above the door of a capital city, a reminder in stone that nothing made of stone is meant to stay. Beyond the gate, two cities unfold into one. A sacred city, a mosque, a saint's tomb, a courtyard worn smooth by pilgrims, and an imperial city, halls of audience, pleasure pavilions, a 5-story palace open to the wind. Every line of it carved from the same red rock of the ridge it stands on. A city the color of a sunset, built by a man trying to hold the sun still. Every famous place has a story everyone agrees on. Here is this city's. In the late 1560s, Akbar ruled an empire that stretched from Kabul to Bengal. He had wealth without limit and an army no one could match. And he had one fear no army could solve. He had no surviving son. His children had died young, one after another. Without an heir, everything he had built could collapse into civil war the day he died. So the emperor went looking, not for a general, but for a holy man. In a small village called Sikri lived a Sufi mystic named Sheikh Salim Chishti, revered for his wisdom and his prayers. The saint told Akbar he would have not one son, but 3. When the emperor's wife grew pregnant, she was sent to live beside the saint, and in the summer of 1569, in that village, a boy was born. Akbar named him Salim, after the saint. 2 more sons followed, exactly as promised. Grateful, awestruck, the emperor made a decision no ruler had made before. He would move his entire capital to the spot where his prayers were answered. And when his armies conquered Gujarat in 1573, he gave the new city its name, Fatehpur, the city of victory. That is the story on every plaque and in every guidebook. It is true. It is also only the surface. because the boy born in this village would change history in a way no one in that delivery room could have imagined. Remember him. We'll come back to him at the very end. Walk deeper in, and you start to notice something the carvings are trying to tell you. Look at the brackets curling out beneath the roofs. Those serpentine struts come from Hindu and Jain temple craft, carried here by stonemasons from Gujarat. Look at the pillars, lotus flowers, bells, chains, even swastikas sharing a wall with arches and domes from Persia. A mosque that borrows the shape of older Indian temples. A tomb screen cut like temple lacework. This is not an accident, and it is not just decoration. It is an argument written in sandstone. At the heart of the imperial quarter stands the din-i-ilahi, the hall of private audience. Step inside and the whole room points to a single carved column in the center, flaring at the top into a great stone lotus. From that platform, 4 narrow bridges run out to the corners. The emperor, the design seems to say, sits at the center of everything, and every path leads to him. Nearby rises the Taj Mahal, 5 open stories, each smaller than the one below, 176 columns stacked into the sky like a temple reaching for the breeze. No 2 of its lower pillars are carved quite alike. Akbar could not read a single word of all this. He was, by his own court's account, completely illiterate. A man who built one of the great libraries of the world, thousands of volumes in Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, and more, and had every one of them read aloud to him. He could not write, but he could build. And what he was building here was a sentence no one had dared to write down: that an empire of many faiths could be won. Somewhere in this city, Akbar built a room that may be the most remarkable room of the entire Mughal age. And here is the first strange thing about it. We are not certain which room it was. They called it the Ibadat Khana, the house of worship. Akbar built it around 1575 so that he could do something almost unthinkable for a ruler of his time. He invited scholars to argue with each other in front of him. At first, only Muslim theologians. But Akbar grew tired of watching them quarrel and condemn, so he threw the doors open. He brought in Hindu pandits and Jain monks. He summoned Zoroastrian priests who still kept the old fire. And from the Portuguese colony at Goa, he called for Catholic missionaries, Jesuit priests who arrived in 1580 in black robes, expecting to convert an emperor and finding instead a man who only wanted to listen. Thursday after Thursday, deep into the night, the faiths of the world debated under one Mughal roof. Out of those nights, Akbar reached for something extraordinary, a principle he called sulh-i-kul, peace with all. The idea that no single religion held the whole truth, and that a just king should stand above them all. He even tried to distill it into a small spiritual path of his own, but it drew only a tiny circle of followers, and the orthodox clergy were appalled. No emperor before him had tried to govern a multi-faith empire by treating every faith as equal. He did it here, in these courtyards, in a room we can no longer even point to with certainty. That is the dream this city was built to hold. Hold on to it, because in a moment, we have to watch him leave it behind. Before we follow Akbar out of the gates, We have to clear away the stories that have grown over this place like moss. Because almost everything you'll be told by a guide here is wrong. The largest palace in the complex is shown to every visitor as the home of Jodha Bai, Akbar's Hindu queen. There was no Jodha Bai. The name is a mistake, invented by a British colonial writer in 1829 and made famous by films ever since. Akbar's Rajput wife, the mother of his heir, was named Harka Bai, a princess of amber. Court custom forbade speaking a royal woman's name aloud, so history simply lost it, and a novelist filled the gap with the wrong one. You'll be shown a great paved courtyard and told the emperor played a board game here using slave girls as living pieces, moving them across the squares. Akbar did love the game, but no record from his own time places that scene in this courtyard. It is a later flourish, the kind of story a place this grand seems to attract. And that tall tower, bristling with stone spikes shaped like elephant tusks. You'll hear it was a monument to a beloved pet elephant. More likely, it was something far less romantic, a lamp tower and a marker stone, the very center point the whole city was planned around. A perfect city deserves perfect legends. But this channel deals in what actually happened. And what actually happened to Fatehpur Sikri is stranger than any of the myths. So, the most powerful man in the world builds a flawless capital and abandons it in 14 years. For 4 centuries, people have offered the same simple answer. The water ran out. It is a clean story. A city on a dry ridge, a lake that failed, a thirsty population forced to leave. You will read it almost everywhere, and the historians who have actually gone looking for the evidence have found a problem. There isn't any. The emperor's own chronicles never mention a water shortage while the city was the capital. His sharpest critic, a man who recorded Akbar's every failing, says nothing about it. Travelers of the time described a lake 2 miles long, full of fish and birds, serving the elephants, the horses, and the whole teeming city. Beneath the streets ran more than a dozen stepwells. The complaint that the water was scarce only appears decades later, long after the court was gone. The water did not drive Akbar out. So what did? In 1585, far to the north, Akbar's half-brother died in Kabul. Overnight, the empire's most dangerous frontier was exposed, open to the Persians, to the Uzbeks, to rebellion in the mountain passes. An emperor cannot defend Kabul from a palace near Agra. So Akbar did what emperors do. He followed the threat. He moved his court to Lahore, closer to the danger, and ruled from there for over a decade. And when the northern crisis finally eased, he didn't come back here. He went to Agra instead, better placed for the next war already brewing in the south. Fatehpur Sikri wasn't defeated. It wasn't cursed. It wasn't even truly abandoned all at once. A market town lingered in its shadow for generations. The capital simply followed the empire's center of gravity as it shifted. The city had done everything it was built to do. The emperor had somewhere else to be. Akbar could take almost everything with him. The treasury moved, the army moved, the court, the painters, the poets, the great library read aloud, all of it went north. There was only one thing he could not pack. The dream, sulh-i-kul. The all-night arguments. The room where a Hindu and a Jesuit and a Muslim sat in the same lamplight and were heard. That belonged to these courtyards, and as the city emptied, the experiment emptied with it. The small faith he had tried to build faded almost as soon as he died. His own grandson let it lapse, and in time, a later emperor, Aurangzeb, would tear down the very idea of it, ruling instead by the strict orthodoxy Akbar had spent his life arguing against. The stones outlived the idea. That is the real loss here. Not a city that ran dry, a vision the world was not ready to keep. Walk these courts today, and you can still feel the size of the ambition. The hall where he sat at the center of everything, the empty platform where the faiths once gathered. A dream of one empire, many gods, all equal, left standing in perfect red sandstone, with no one left to believe it. The lake is gone now. Just dry fields where 2 miles of water once mirrored the palace walls. The courts are silent. The wind moves through the open stories of the Taj Mahal the way it always did. But one thing in this city never stopped. At the saint's tomb, behind screens of marble cut as fine as lace, people still come to tie a single thread and make a wish. Most of all, the wish that a child will be born. 4.5 centuries on, they are still asking Salim Chishti for the same thing Akbar once asked. And remember the boy, the child whose birth raised this whole city, the one Akbar named for the saint. He grew up to become an emperor in his own right. And his son would one day build a tomb of white marble for a wife he could not stop grieving. A monument so perfect, the whole world still lines up to see it. The baby born in this quiet village is the reason the Taj Mahal exists. An emperor built a perfect city to hold a perfect dream, and learned that the only thing stone cannot keep is an idea. The world is a bridge. He carved that himself above the gate. This is Fatehpur Sikri.